Ladies and gentlemen, our next Warrior Corner topic, Choose AMCOM Organic Industrial Base Capabilities, presented by Major General Tom O'Connor, Commanding General, Aviation and Missile Command. Please welcome him.
Good morning, everyone. There we go. First and foremost, it's my distinct honor to be here today representing the 12,000 AMCOM employees that are globally positioned around the world to support our warfighters and enable the joint force by enabling their readiness across the board. So again, it's my honor. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank AUSA, certainly General Brown, the entire staff, for all their hard work to put this event together. It's been a wonderful opportunity for all of us to collaborate, to innovate, to discuss, to understand perspectives, ideas, thoughts, and ways forward. So I just want to say thank you to the AUSA staff. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank the sponsors. I didn't thank the exhibitors. I certainly didn't thank industry, the Huntsville community for opening their arms and really opening their ideas and thoughts for all of us to share while we're here today. So with that being said, I'd like to dive right into a couple of discussions for today and then open it up for any questions that you might have across the board. So first and foremost, go to the next slide, please. First and foremost, really what we've been hyper-focused on, just kind of trying to figure how we can help reduce the burden on the tactical units, how we can improve their material readiness to ensure that they're standing ready to deter regional aggression, and if deterrence fails, to be able to fight and win our nation's wars. And by doing that, we think through, some of the challenges that exist across the board. We think through some of the opportunities that are out there and some of the things that we need to do to help innovate to ensure that we're continuously modernizing, reforming, changing, but we're also supporting those soldiers that are in the fight today that's in there. One of the things that we've been able to successfully do and continue to do is to leverage some technology, some new technology, whether it be blue light scanning, whether it be laser alignment tools, whether it be cold spray, to help take that new technology and repair forward. Anytime that we can have a depot team deploy forward, it reduces the cost and the delay by shipping those major end items, those combat weapon systems, back to a depot or a major maintenance facility across the board. And it truly enables readiness for the units by returning combat power, critical enablers of critical combat power to the warfighter more rapidly across the board. We've got tons of examples across the board, but everything from battle crash damage repairs, everything from just structural, corrosion prevention across the board. Things that we're doing to help enable them and really return the weapon systems to its warfighting capability, supporting the warfighter forward across the board. But again, this saves time, money, and improves readiness where we're at. The other thing we're hyper-focused on is how do we close the experience gap? The experience gap of our soldiers, our maintainers, and really even our artisans at the depots across the board. We all lived through the global pandemic. We all recognize the challenges for talent across the board. We recognize that post-pandemic, with the amount of workforce, drain across the board, we've had some loss in capability with some of our vendors. Have chosen to move on to do other things. How do we close some of that gaps? The fight for talent is real, and we're working very hard to help minimize some of the gap. Just at Corpus Christi and Letterkenny, two of our depots, just in the last month, we've had artisans retire after 50 years of service. It's 50 years of service to our nation. It's 50 years of knowledge, experience, expertise, that we're trying to onboard new individuals, recruit, retain, and then also train them to ensure that they're able to perform those tasks well. Also closing the experience gap with our soldiers. The Army, has a constant turnover of individuals and soldiers across the board. How do we onboard them? How do we enable them to maintain the complex weapon systems that we have to ensure, that they are ready to fight and win when asked to do so. Part of some of these innovative solutions is leveraging telemaintenance, leveraging high-velocity training, digitalization of our work structures, finding a way to leverage, some automated systems, automated work structure instructions, visualization tools, 3D modeling, to enable to onboard them, educate them, and then give them an opportunity to work through, rehearse, and really train on some of the maintenance tasks that we ask them to do before they have the opportunity to do that. We've been very successful at it, and we've had some great results, but of course, there's still more to do in this area. As we think through the future, we think through what tools, what equipment sets do we need. We talk through virtual reality glasses, a way where we can get some of our, engineers, from across the enterprise to be able to communicate and visualize and look, through the eyes of the mechanic. Work through our maintenance engineering changes. Working through some opportunities to, again, repair as far forward as we can without actually having to have an engineer out, in a company or a platoon tactical assembly area across the board. But this is the technology that we know we need. This is the type of the innovation that we're pursuing and looking forward to, to onboard. These are the places where we think we can help reduce and close some of the experience gap that we have across the board. When it's all said and done, data-informed decisions, certainly is enabling us to act with more precision and more speed, more efficiently across the board. And there's places and spaces that we have lots of data. We just don't have that data in the right spot, at the right time. So it's trying to figure out how do we manage that data, how do we transport that data, how do we communicate that across the board. You'll hear, you've heard throughout this entire week, multiple individuals talking about precision logistics and understanding the data to drive commanders' decisions at echelon, across the board. And I'll just talk about a few of them. So our weapon systems, we've been sending digital traffic for years. Digital traffic for 20, 25 years from the cockpits, from vehicles that are in the tactical units back to their tactical assembly areas. And some of those, some of that traffic has our fuel status, our ammo status. It's coming off of our combat platforms, and it's sitting, in the tactical unit. What we need to move forward on is taking that data and transporting it from an enterprise solution back to the enterprise to ensure that we can see and understand at echelon. The days of the digital log stats or the Excel spreadsheets passing off of an email, back to a unit echelon, when they're moving and in contact in the EW environment, sometimes becomes delayed, irrelevant or 2 to 3 days behind. We need to figure a way to get that data in real time back to at echelon so we can make decisions at echelon across the board. Some of our investments across the enterprise are developing some of these digital tools. We just fielded in the AH-64 a data tool that allows maintainers to get real-time vibration analysis, temperature, some indications in the cockpit, again, to the mechanic at the tactical assembly area. So at the tactical edge, I think we've done a really good job of, communicating and pushing data. It's getting it from the tactical edge back to the enterprise to ensure that we can understand trends, without having to have a crew chief download, put a computer up to an aircraft, stick a thumb drive in, put it onto a transport device and send it back. We probably need to automate that and think through how do we automate the communication of data from the tactical edge back to the enterprise to ensure that we can be predictive with our sustainment requirements and enable us in a secure environment to anticipate requirements as we continue to move forward and find. I know Colonel Upton talked yesterday, and we've all experienced, the log stats and the HEMTs, taking the 3-meter stick and sticking it in the back of a HEMT, to determine how much fuel is actually in that HEMT, is a little bit antiquated. And then certainly that log stack making it back to TOCs and command posts at echelon to ensure that we're not sending combat logistical patrols full of fuel to deliver it to a unit that can't receive it because they have more fuel than we anticipated. So real-time data will really help enable us to be more precise, with our delivery of supplies. And it's not just fuel; it's water, it's ammo, it's Class 9 parts. As much as we can automate and digitize the sustainment apparatus, it'll enable us to ensure that we deliver material at the point of need to ensure that we can sustain combat readiness moving forward. So with that being said, there's certainly a lot of challenges across the board, but it's really about delivering sustainment and material forward to the units in the field to ensure they can sustain readiness. But in order to do that, we've got to continuously modernize our efforts across the board. We've got to continuously modernize, everything from our depots with the OEMs back to the foxholes to ensure that not only are we delivering new material, but we're material that's sustainable and reliable moving forward. One of the places that we're looking to modernize in the future, and I know Ms. Wicker talked yesterday about the OIB modernization program and efforts that are ongoing. And I'd just like to highlight just a few of them. When you think through the organic industrial base, the two of them that fall under our command at AMCOM is Letterkenny Depot in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, and Corpus Christi Army Depot out in Corpus Christi, Texas. Both of those facilities were built in 1941 and 1942, respectively. In 1941, a hangar that was in a facility that was built to overhaul and repair seaplanes is not necessarily meeting the needs to sustain the current fleet of equipment that we have, but also set the conditions for the future fleet. Very similar in Letterkenny, built in 1942, again, not necessarily optimized to support the current weapon systems that we have and the future weapon systems that we know are along the way. One of the places that we're looking to modernize at Letterkenny is with an anechoic chamber. One that allows us to drive in, some of our larger radar systems across the board. This investment will enable us to tool and meet the tooling requirements to support our weapon systems in the future. And again, an anechoic chamber, allows us to sustain and return back to the fight our weapon systems. The weapon systems that we know we need to fight and win on the future battlefield across the board. Go to the next slide real quick. Very, very similar at CCAD. Again, a lot of investment across CCAD just to ensure that we're modernizing their facilities, to ensure that we've updated the infrastructure, the IT networks. We've updated the training and onboarding of our individuals across the board. We're building the facilities and the tooling to support, a efficient flow of repair, an agile flow of repair to ensure we set the conditions to repair the components of today and set the conditions for the components that we know we'll have to repair in the future across the board. If you think about the depot and what the depot does, what the depots do for a force, they repair and return components, right? They are repairing components, to put them back in the field to enable our readiness. They're saving the Army money, and they're building readiness across time. Instead of having to buy new components, we're fixing them, and we're sending them back. If you think through some of our battle-damaged aircraft, it's about 20% the cost for an Apache to get fixed versus going out and buying a new one. About the same for Blackhawks and Chinooks across the board. And it varies depending on the battle damage across the board, anywhere from 20 to 50 to 49%, depending on what we have to do. But if we could repair and return, we're saving the taxpayer money, we're putting readiness back in the field, and we're also doing it at a faster pace than getting into the production process, depending on ongoing procurement requirements across the board. That alone is generating combat power, and it's putting weapon systems back in the hands of our warfighters. On the component side of the house, the amount of components that are repaired are saving, again, the Army money. Instead of buying new engines or transmissions, we're overhauling and we're repairing them. We're getting them returned back to the field in a manner that enables the units to install them and put them back on aircraft to ensure that they can maintain the readiness. Or our Patriot radar systems. Our ADA systems are critically important to the defense, of and protection of our soldiers and our allies across the globe. Actively employed in many places today. That Patriot system and all of our ADA systems are saving lives. Our air defense systems require overhaul, maintenance, and sustainment. When you run generators and radars for 365 days a year, you bring them back, you overhaul them, you ensure that they're ready to meet the readiness requirements for the future deployments across the board. again, we're certainly happy, with what the depots do in terms of capability and capacity, but we're also looking for partnerships across the board with the OEMs. There are plenty of processes and capabilities that we have at the strategic, reserve of our nation, which is our depots, that provide, an insurance policy to ensure we can surge to meet wartime requirements. But there's opportunities for industry across the board, for industry to invest in, to gain into private-public partnerships or customer support agreements, to leverage that workforce, the capital investment, the capabilities and the processes that we have at our depots with our artisans. And when the business case makes sense, it's a win-win for everybody. It gives our artisans the sets and the reps to work on their skills. It allows us to share best practices across the board, and it truly enables us to return components and major end items back to the force in a timely enough manner to ensure that we can support the readiness requirements across the board. Next slide. Just like to highlight a few of those things as you think about the world-class, plating, our wiring capabilities, our cold spray, and advanced manufacturing capabilities that we have at our depot. These are processes that industry can leverage, the secure networks, that we have, which will provide some opportunities for industry, all industry, to kind of look at and explore and see what Letterkenny and Corpus Christi can provide for you in terms of reducing some of your long lead time parts or long lead time processes, offer alternate sources of repair, and in some cases, alternate sources of supply as we enter some customer support agreements with the team. Next slide, please. I'd also be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to talk about some of the other depot capabilities that are out there. I wouldn't be a good AMC teammate if I didn't, brag about TACOM and CCOM in particular. Toby Hanna has got some incredible capabilities, but so does TACOM, whether it be Red River, Rock Island, you name it. If you're not familiar with some of the depot capabilities, I'd ask you to take a look at and see what options and opportunities there are in there. I know in the aerospace industry there's some significant challenges associated with castings and forgings in particular, advanced manufacturing capabilities. Well, Rock Island has got a tremendous amount of capabilities, not only today, but they're also investing into the future. And if you can look from everything from 3D printing, from powder-based fusion, from sand printing as well. They've got polymer printing. They've got certainly the castings and forgings for multiple metals across the board. There's plenty of opportunities to look at and mitigate the risks within the supply chain to ensure that we can leverage, you all can leverage that to ensure that you're meeting, delivery schedules associated with the components that are part of it. Next slide. Before I go into questions, I just wanted to highlight just a couple of other quick things across the board. So one of our challenges is ensuring that we are delivering the material that we have procured and put on purchase order requests to the warfighter to enable their readiness across the board. And I would ask industry to kind of think through a few things. One of them is when you look around this room, you see some incredible capability, some innovation, in solving some of our critical problems that we have as a joint force. I'd ask you to think through how do we sustain this capability and how do we make it so it's reliable? Because great systems and great capability aren't really worth anything in a soldier's hand if it's not ready, it's not reliable, and they can't sustain it. So I'd ask you, not only are you innovating to solve some of these problems, but you think through how do we sustain it, how do we make it more reliable, how do we reduce mean time between failure, how do we reduce the burden on these soldiers in the field that are counting on us to deliver capable equipment for them so they can deter aggression and fight and win if asked to do so. Last thing I'll say is this will defend, and it's all about them today out there on the front lines in those tactical formations and those that will be out there in the future. With that being said, I'll open up for any questions.
Fixing forward, and sometimes that's a thing that you have to do because in some of the environments we're going to be fighting in, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult for you to extract your helicopters or a HIMARS or a Patriot out of theater to send back to depot. And you talked about sending capabilities forward, and they're doing some of that now with the Ukrainians, where they're doing remote telemaintenance with the Ukrainians, providing the support for them to do some of that in theater. Given the constraints of the public environment here, could you talk a little bit more about how you see that pushing depot capabilities forward into theater for this kind of thing?
No, that's a great question, right? So a few things. I mean, you think back through World War II, how many supply ships, were sunk, in the Pacific or Atlantic Oceans. So and you talk about contested logistics, so we know that we're going to be living in a contested logistic environment, if we ever have to face a future conflict across the board. So how do you minimize the burden, on that entire distribution network? Bringing Patriot weapon systems back here or ADA or exquisite weapon systems back puts it at risk, takes it out of the fight for a long period of time. So we want to repair forward as much as we can across the board. And telemaintenance is nothing new. We were doing it in Afghanistan, for the last 25 years. We're continue to do it, across the world. We do it even in the U.S. Army. We've got our great engineers, our liaison engineers that's out there on the phone all the time, talking to our Lars forward in the field, who's talking to the units that are out there. So telemaintenance has been around for a while. How do we make it, modernized and make it more effective across the board? Well, one, I think there's opportunities to resolve some 3D, or maybe some augmented reality lenses or glasses as part of a standard issue toolbox. Where I can get on, an aircraft or a Patriot system. I can put a headset on. I can call back to my friend Keith Darrow and say, Keith, I can't figure this out, and Keith gives me some great advice on how to troubleshoot and how to fix it across the board. So I think that's part of the future. I think also automating and digitizing some of our basically our dash 10s, our maintenance manuals, and having a mechanic having the ability to actually walk through in a 3D model, to see what the maintenance repair would be, would help that. In 2019, the Department of Defense signed some agreements, with some nations to think through what would a depot forward look like in certain regions, and certainly there's intellectual property discussions, but it's part of a theater security cooperation agreement, to understand where we can put our TASMs, forward and occupy some depot space to help repair and reduce the burden of moving equipment back. And then only bring it back, when we have to. But some of the things I talked about is laser alignment tools. So what are the tools that we need that only exist in a depot, and how can we digitize them or reduce the burden by bringing them forward? I didn't really talk about it today, but another place is our test, diagnostic, and measurement, equipment. So every torque wrench has to get, has to get calibrated. But the thing that calibrates the torque wrench has to get calibrated by something else, which has to get calibrated by something else. So that whole network is requiring of shipping material back and forth. We talk about precision navigation and timing. Everything that we do on communication, down to maintenance has some sort of precision instrument that's required to ensure that we can fight and move forward. So how do we move that far forward as well? Where do we innovate with NIST on a chip, or how do we develop and reduce the requirement to move material back and forth? I think those are some of the places where, we can move teams forward. This last year, we sent 99 depot repair teams forward to go repair weapon systems forward. The more tools that we have to do that, the more opportunities will be to ensure that we can keep those weapon systems from having to come back. Great question, thank you. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
About 15 years ago, the OIB transitioned to LMP, which was not an easy transition. With EBSC coming down sooner rather than later, that converges LMP, GCSS Army, ACIP Hub, GFEDS into one end-to-end with minimal customization. I see the challenge is going to be more on the OIB workforce than the tactical workforce. So just interested in how AMC and the OIB is leaning forward for that change management task going forward.
Now, sir, that's a great question and it's a great point. I mean, change is always hard, right? You know, it's a cultural thing you have to overcome. It's ensuring that we set the conditions to enable that transition to occur. You know, and then that's the testing. It's the it's the validation of those requirements, and that the systems are talking to each other, communicating, the verification of data, across the board. I will tell you that the team is hyperly engaged, on trying to ensure that we secure the data, we test the data, we're running the data, and then we're making sure that those communication links exist in a manner that enables us to see ourselves and operate to support the requirements. But I do think that the impact is certainly going to be on the enterprise side of the house, more so at the tactical units. But I'll also tell you, when, in the tactical unit, when we went to G Army, there was a blackout period. I mean, but we've done this before, over and over again. It's just as we continue to evolve. But what the benefit is when we have systems that can communicate and talk to each other, and we converge them, then you don't have all these stovepipe one-offs and, just I mean, I can't take a PowerPoint slide and change it to a PDF without the font changing, right? So, as we think through these enterprise solutions, we want to make sure that that transition occurs as seamless as possible. But I would tell you, sir, it's informing the requirements and then the deliberate and validation of the testing is the only way that we're going to manage that transition. Great question, sir. And of course, every transition is a concern, right? That's where risk is. Every commander's been taught something, but tune leader, the risk is always in transition. So what are you doing to help mitigate the transition and ensure that it comes through to support the requirements? Great, thank you, sir. Any other questions? Perfect. Well, thank you all very much for your time. Thank you for what you do. And just remember, it's all about supporting each other.